Hi guys, today we'll delve into the case of a woman who mysteriously disappeared after a dinner with her family. When the police got involved, they started finding some pretty unsettling clues that led them to some rather unusual, even strange suspects. In the end, they managed to solve this mystery, and it turned out that the answer had been right in front of them the whole time. Lisa Valdez was born on September 6, 1961, in San Francisco, California. She had a brother and a loving mother, although their father wasn't involved in their lives. Despite this, Lisa was exceptionally close to her mother and they almost never argued. Everyone who knew them always marveled at how perfect their relationship seemed. In her teenage years, Lisa took up dancing and it became one of her greatest passions. She also had a keen interest in modern technology, getting into the IT field when it was still in its infancy. For instance, she started using email when most of her friends hadn't even heard of it. This interest in technology shaped her future career. After college, Lisa got a job as a software analyst in San Francisco. Sometime later, her mother used her savings to buy Lisa an apartment in a prestigious neighborhood. It was a small studio, but the complex was located on a hill, offering a beautiful view of the city. Lisa lived in this apartment alone, moving up in her career and spending as much time as possible with her family. She also didn't give up dancing, going to dance practice every week with her best friend. On May 16, 1998, when Lisa was 36, she invited her mother and some family friends over for the evening. After the guests left, her mother helped with the dishes and headed home. Before she left, Lisa promised to call her the next day, but she never called. At first, her mom figured she was just busy. Lisa was supposed to go to dance practice that day, so her mom decided to wait. But the whole day went by without hearing from Lisa. The next day, she tried calling Lisa herself, but there was no answer. The mother kept trying to reach her daughter, but Lisa never picked up. On the fourth day, Monday, Lisa's colleagues called her mother and informed her that Lisa hadn't shown up for work and wasn't answering their calls. This was very unusual because Lisa was very responsible and had never missed work without notice. Worried, her mother decided to go to Lisa's apartment complex to check on her. But, as soon as she arrived, she saw police tape around the building. There were many officers present, and she asked them what was happening. The police explained that just a few hours earlier, residents had complained to the manager about a strange smell coming from one of the apartments. When the manager went to check, he found the door unlocked. He opened it and immediately saw a body on the floor, then called the police. The officers quickly identified the deceased as Lisa. She was partially undressed and her body showed clear signs of trauma, indicating it was a murder. Based on the state of decomposition, they estimated she had been dead for several days. The police also suspected she had been assaulted, as her underwear was found next to her body. The room was covered in bloodstains, both on the floor and on the bed. The TV was on and the air conditioner was set to 78 degrees. The apartment was also in disarray, but detectives later discovered that this was normal for Lisa, who wasn't meticulous about keeping things tidy. There were no signs of a robbery. All her valuables, including jewelry, were left in plain sight. The only things missing were her keys and a gym bag. Another odd detail was that the attacker had cut off some of Lisa's long hair and taken it with them. Combined with numerous injuries on her body, this suggested strong personal motives. Detectives speculated that the killer might have known Lisa and, for some reason, hated her. Supporting the idea that Lisa knew her attacker was the fact that there were no signs of forced entry. Plus, Lisa's apartment complex was fenced and you needed either a key or to be let in by a resident. The police started interviewing residents of the complex, hoping someone had seen the attacker, and they quickly found their first lead. One of Lisa's neighbors mentioned that 2 days earlier, after returning from vacation, he noticed part of the metal frame of his front door was bent and there was a faint bloodstain on the door. He reported it to the manager, but they decided not to involve the police since it was clear no one had broken into his apartment. Detectives were almost certain the same person who killed Lisa was responsible for this incident, but the motives behind the actions were unclear. Perhaps the killer tried to break into the neighbor's apartment and was caught by Lisa, leading to her murder. According to another theory, the attempt to break into the neighbor's apartment might have occurred after Lisa's murder, which seemed odd. Detectives talked to the housekeeper who cleaned Lisa's apartment every week. 2 days before they found Lisa's body, she used her key to enter the complex and tried to open Lisa's door, but it was blocked from the inside. She peeked through the crack and saw a partially undressed woman on the floor and heard a man's voice. Assuming she was interrupting something private, she left right away. The police believe Lisa was already dead by then and the man's voice belonged to her killer, who was still in the apartment. The housekeeper also mentioned a curious detail. She thought she saw a black bag with a zipper near the body, but she wasn't sure since she only glanced inside for a second. Notably, there was an untouched envelope with cash taped to the inside of Lisa's apartment door. This money was meant for the housekeeper as Lisa always left it the day before her scheduled visits since she wouldn't be home. The presence of the envelope indicated that Lisa was likely attacked after her mother left, between midnight and early morning hours, as this was when she would have left the money. This theory was soon confirmed by the neighbors living on the floor below. They reported hearing noises from above that night, sounding like thumps, followed by someone coming down the stairs, though they didn't see who it was. While medical experts examined Lisa's body, detectives continued searching her apartment for clues. They soon noticed something unusual. The toilet seat was up, which was odd for a woman living alone. Forensic experts examined it and found a partial fingerprint that didn't belong to Lisa. The police collected fingerprints from all of Lisa's acquaintances and relatives who might have been in her apartment, but none matched. This led detectives to believe the fingerprint might belong to the killer. The medical experts soon finished their report, giving a new lead. Lisa's body had over 20 stab wounds, but because of the decomposition, they couldn't tell if she had been sexually assaulted. However, they found defensive wounds on her body, indicating that Lisa tried to fight off her attacker. The experts also found skin particles under her nails, likely from the killer, and sent them to the lab for analysis. Meanwhile, forensic experts examined evidence from the apartment and found a crucial clue. One of the pillowcases had numerous bloodstains, but analysis revealed that not all the blood belonged to Lisa. Some stains were different, so the pillowcase was sent to the lab for further examination. Investigators theorized that the killer might have accidentally injured himself while stabbing Lisa, which was common in such cases since a knife can easily slip. This theory was supported by another finding. Inside the toilet, they discovered 2 bandages from a first aid kit, which the killer might have used to stop his bleeding. He also could have left his fingerprints on the toilet seat while throwing away the bandages. DNA analysis showed that the blood on the pillowcase belonged to an unknown man, not in the DNA database. The skin particles from under Lisa's nails also matched this man, as did the bloodstain on her neighbor's door. Although there were no matches in the DNA database, detectives now had the killer's DNA profiled. They began comparing it with samples from suspects in their system who had committed crimes in Lisa's area and also started looking closely at her acquaintances. Lisa's mother revealed that Lisa had been dating a man named Albert Quito, and they were supposed to go on a date the day after the murder. However, Quito had canceled it just a few days prior. Detectives brought Quito in for questioning, and they immediately noticed a large cut on his hand. They suspected that the killer might have injured his hand while stabbing Lisa. This immediately made Quito a suspect, but he denied any involvement in the murder. The detectives took his fingerprints and DNA samples and sent them to the lab for comparison. To their surprise, none of it matched. The blood on the pillowcase and the skin particles from under Lisa's nails clearly belonged to someone else. Investigators continued searching for other possible suspects and decided to listen to the messages on Lisa's answering machine left in the days leading up to the murder. They compiled a list of 40 callers, but one strange message stood out to them. Just a few hours before the murder, while Lisa still had guests at her home, a man called her, but she didn't pick up. So, he left a rather unusual message. "You know how it goes, Takeda? Hey Lisa, are you home?" The police played this message for Lisa's friend, who immediately recognized the voice as belonging to a colleague of Lisa's named Albert Robinson. He had repeatedly expressed romantic feelings for Lisa, but she wasn't interested in a relationship with him. They continued to interact at work and in the company of mutual acquaintances, and Lisa considered him a friend. Several days after the murder, during the victim family's memorial service, something else happened. Robinson showed up and gave a speech that puzzled everyone present. He claimed that he and Lisa were deeply in love, planning to get married and start a family. Lisa's friends and her mother stated that Robinson's words were completely untrue. Lisa had told them that Robinson had shown interest in her, but she had no romantic feelings for him. Lisa's mother also stressed their close relationship, saying that Lisa wouldn't hide such plans from her. Robinson was brought in for questioning, where he denied any involvement in the murder. He said he loved Lisa and claimed he would never harm her. However, he refused to provide his DNA sample and fingerprints to the police. All of this pointed towards Robinson as the main suspect, and detectives kept searching for any new leads. If Robinson was truly obsessed with Lisa and she didn't feel the same way, it could have driven him to commit such an act. The brutality of the crime strongly suggested personal motives, and the fact that the killer had cut off some of her hair and taken it with them could be connected to his obsession. Detectives eventually were able to obtain a search warrant for his house, where they found something truly unusual. There were dozens of Lisa's photos everywhere, further indicating Robinson's obsession. However, Robinson continued to deny his involvement in the murder. This time, he provided his fingerprints and DNA sample. Detectives were almost certain he was the killer, but they were surprised when the lab results showed no match with the samples found at the victim's apartment. As a result, Robinson was removed from the list of suspects, and the police continued to search for new leads. Despite their efforts, the detectives repeatedly hit dead ends, and the case remained unsolved for years. Investigators repeatedly sought updates on the comparison of the killer's DNA sample and fingerprints with databases, hoping that he would surface for some other crimes, but it never happened. Initially, police found it strange that someone who committed such a brutal crime wasn't in the databases, as they doubted it was his first serious offense. Over the following years, police continued to check for matches in the databases, but they always came up empty. Lisa's mother gave interviews on television multiple times, urging anyone with information to come forward. But detectives still couldn't find any new leads. In 2010, detectives learned that the FBI had started using a new DNA technology to compare the suspects' samples with individuals in the database to locate their relatives. Unlike genetic genealogy, which emerged several years later, this method only worked with close relatives. For example, experts could find the father or a brother of the DNA owner in the database. With no other leads, in 2011, police requested such a comparison and began waiting. On September 2nd, the lead detective received a call from the FBI with two pieces of news, good and bad. They stated they wouldn't perform the comparison with possible relatives in the database, but the reason was quite unexpected. Before conducting such a comparison, experts always retested the suspect's DNA sample, and this time, 13 years after the murder, it came back as a perfect match. The DNA from blood and skin particles found under Lisa's nails matched a sample from a 52-year-old man named Anthony Hughes, who had just recently entered the DNA database. The man had an extensive criminal history spanning decades, but none of his crimes required his DNA sample to be entered into the system. With changes in laws, criminals in California were required to submit DNA samples regardless of the severity of the crime, and Anthony's sample ended up in the database after he was arrested for a simple shoplifting incident. His fingerprints were also entered into the databases, and they matched the fingerprint found on the toilet seat in Lisa's apartment. Experts even identified the specific finger that left the print pretty easily. Before arresting the man, detectives attempted to find any other evidence that could connect him to the crime. Here, they encountered a surprising turn of events. 13 years ago, the police listened to messages left for Lisa on her answering machine. However, they only reviewed calls made to her phone before the murder. Now, after all these years, detectives suddenly discovered that Anthony Hughes had called Lisa just a day after her death and left her a message. Its content was quite ordinary and did not raise any suspicions. However, had the police investigated Anthony back then, they would have not only discovered his extensive criminal record, but also something else. Upon reviewing Lisa's belongings, detectives examined her address book and found Anthony's phone number, confirming that the victim knew him. After talking to Lisa's friends, the police learned that she had apparently dated Anthony for a while in high school, and now the detectives had everything they needed to question the man. At that time, he didn't have a fixed address, so they decided to proceed carefully to prevent the suspect from fleeing. They arrested him, saying that the police were investigating a series of robberies in San Francisco, and he surrendered without resistance. During the interrogation, detectives started by asking about a series of robberies before smoothly transitioning to Anthony's criminal record. Eventually, they asked if he knew Lisa Valdez. At first, he said no, but when they showed her photo, he admitted they knew each other from high school. Anthony also claimed he hadn't seen her since the late 80s. Over several hours, detectives questioned him about their relationship and whether he'd seen her recently. Finally, they confronted him about his DNA found in Lisa's apartment in 1998. Anthony suddenly began crying and asked for a pen and paper. Thinking he was ready to confess, they handed it over, but to their surprise, the man started hitting himself with the pen. They had to restrain him while he continued crying and shouting that they were trying to frame him for a crime he didn't commit. After that, Anthony was charged with the murder, and detectives informed Lisa's relatives that her killer had finally been caught. However, they had to wait another 4 years before the trial began. In court, Anthony initially appeared confident, even arrogant, and smirked. But as the proceedings continued, he began showing up with a Bible in hand and a cross around his neck, which the detectives saw as an attempt to sway the jurors. His lawyer insisted Anthony couldn't physically have committed the murder. He had been diagnosed with a condition 5 years prior that weakened his muscles, making repetitive movements extremely difficult. The lawyer argued that Anthony wouldn't have been able to inflict over 20 stab wounds on the victim. But medical reports from the year of the murder showed that Anthony's condition was under control and treatment was effective. Moreover, the prosecution had much stronger evidence pointing directly to his presence in the victim's apartment. His skin was found under Lisa's nails, his blood on a pillowcase, and his fingerprint on the toilet seat. But despite all this, Anthony continued to insist he hadn't seen Lisa since the late 80s. The prosecution theorized that Anthony contacted Lisa and went to her home, where he attempted to engage in intimacy with her, but she refused. In a fit of rage, he then killed her, cut off a portion of her hair, and took it with him before fleeing the scene. In the end, the jury unanimously found him guilty of first-degree murder. However, there was a problem with convicting him of assault. The prosecution believed Anthony had indeed assaulted the victim, but due to the extent of decomposition, there was no direct evidence to confirm it. The situation was further complicated when, before sentencing, Anthony challenged the assault charges, arguing that the 13-year delay in bringing charges violated his constitutional rights. As a result, the primary charges were reduced from first-degree murder to second-degree murder, resulting in a less severe punishment. Anthony eventually received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after just 16 years, in 2031, when he would be 72. Since then, Anthony has been serving his sentence in prison and continues to maintain his innocence. Lisa's relatives hope that his parole request will be denied, which is quite likely. Often, refusal to admit guilt is seen by the parole board as a lack of remorse, meaning the offender doesn't deserve to be released. Share your thoughts on this story in the comments section, and don't forget to press the like button if you enjoyed my video.